The twin suns of the desert world shone brightly over the busy marketplace. The air was full of noise, voices of traders calling out their prices, the smell of roasted food, the sound of footsteps moving quickly over the stone streets. The city was alive, but today something unusual was about to happen. Something that people would whisper about for many days to come. In the middle of the crowd, 3 young alien boys ran together. They were brothers, small in size, with glowing blue skin and wide shining eyes that reflected innocence. Their clothes were old, torn in places, but their laughter carried through the air. They were children of the lower quarter, known by many, but noticed by few. The crowd suddenly grew quiet when a tall figure appeared at the edge of the market. A human. His clothes were clean, heavy with gold and white fabric, shining under the sunlight. His boots made a sharp sound against the stones. His face carried the calm expression of someone who believed he was important, someone who owned everything he saw. The people whispered to one another, because humans were rare in the city. And when humans appeared, they never came without reason. The 3 alien boys stopped running when the human's shadow fell across their path. He looked down at them with cold eyes, then at the heavy silver bags placed beside him. Without asking permission, without even a smile, he gestured at the bags and pointed at the boys. His voice was deep, commanding. As he said, "Carry them." The boys looked at each other in silence. They were young, but they understood his tone. Refusing was not an option. Slowly, they bent down and lifted the bags. They were heavier than anything they had carried before, metal cases that clanked when moved. The crowd watched quietly as the boys struggled, their small hands gripping the handles, their thin arms shaking with effort. The human walked behind them, slow and confident, his eyes scanning the crowd as if daring anyone to question him. The market that had been so loud a few minutes earlier now felt strangely quiet. People pretended to return to their business, but their eyes followed the strange line of the 3 alien children, leading the rich human through the streets. An old merchant whispered to another, "Why them? Why children?" The second only shook his head. Fear kept their voices low. Everyone knew humans had power, more power than most could understand. To speak against them was to invite danger. The boys continued to drag the heavy cases, sweat forming on their glowing skin. Their breaths came fast, but they did not stop. The human's calm face showed no pity, no care for their struggle. He only followed, step by step, as if this was nothing more than natural. One of the boys, the youngest, looked back for just a second. His eyes searched the crowd as if asking for help, but no one moved. No one dared. He turned back and kept pulling. By the time they reached the far end of the marketplace, whispers had spread everywhere. Some said the human was testing the children. Others believed he was hiding something valuable inside those silver bags. A few even feared he was marking the boys for something darker. The boys did not know the reason. They only knew that their arms ached, and their hearts were heavy with questions. Why had the human chosen them? What was inside those cases? Why had the people only watched in silence? The sun lowered slowly, casting long shadows across the street. The 3 brothers disappeared, with the human into the edge of the city. And though the market returned to its usual noise, a quiet unease settled in the hearts of all who had witnessed it. Something about the way the human smiled at the boys as they struggled did not feel right. It was the beginning of a story that would change everything. The sun had almost set when the 3 alien boys finally reached the edge of the market. Their small bodies trembled with exhaustion, but they did not dare to stop. The human walked behind them like a shadow, his steps slow and steady, his face calm but unreadable. When they reached a quiet corner, he motioned for them to drop the bags. The heavy cases landed on the ground with a metallic thud that echoed against the sandstone walls. The boys breathed heavily, their chests rising and falling fast. The human did not thank them. He only studied them with sharp eyes, as though memorizing every detail of their faces. For a long moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched, filling the boys with unease. Finally, he lifted one of the cases with surprising ease and turned away without a word. The boys stood frozen, staring at his tall figure until it disappeared into the darkening streets. When the human was gone, the brothers exchanged nervous glances. None of them knew why they had been chosen, or why he had looked at them in such a strange way. The youngest whispered, "He knows us." The older brother shook his head quickly, but the words lingered in the air like smoke. They hurried back through the market, where the normal noise had returned, though people still cast sideways glances at them. Whispers followed them as they moved, fragments of words they could not fully hear. Some voices carried pity, others fear. The boys kept their heads down, wishing only to reach home. By the time they arrived at their small house, the desert sky was full of stars. Their mother was waiting outside, her figure glowing softly in the starlight. She was a beautiful alien woman, graceful even in her simple dress. The moment she saw her sons, her relief was clear. She pulled them into her arms, hugging them tightly as if she feared they would vanish. When they told her what had happened, her smile faded. Her hands trembled as she touched their faces, checking they were unharmed. She asked again and again if the human had spoken, if he had asked questions, if he had followed them home. The boys shook their heads, confused by her fear. To them, it had only been a strange, tiring task. To her, it was something far more dangerous. That night, after feeding her children and putting them to bed, she sat awake alone. Her eyes searched the dark sky through the small window of their home. Memories returned, memories she had tried to bury. She remembered humans in other cities, humans who had promised peace, but brought only chains. She remembered how quickly kindness could turn to cruelty when power was in human hands. Her sons did not know this past. They only knew the stories she told them at night, gentle tales to help them sleep. She had never spoken of the fear she carried inside, the fear that one day the humans would return to her life. Now, with the arrival of this wealthy traveler, she felt that day had come. In the silence of the night, she whispered to herself, "It begins again." The desert wind moved through the cracks of the walls, carrying her words into the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, the human was still awake too, his mind working, his eyes full of secrets. The paths of the human and the alien family had crossed, and nothing in the city would ever be the same again. The next morning began with the rising heat of the twin suns. The city stirred to life, its sandstone walls glowing under the golden light. Merchants rolled open their stalls, voices lifted to attract buyers, and the smell of spices and roasted grains filled the air. Yet inside a small home at the edge of the city, the alien boys woke to find their mother already awake, sitting silently by the doorway. Her eyes were tired, as if she had not closed them once during the night. The boys rushed to her side, their laughter filling the air as they told her about their dreams. But she did not smile the way she usually did. She only stroked their hair gently, her thoughts far away. When they asked if they could play in the streets, her voice turned sharp for the first time. "No," she said firmly, "not today." The boys fell quiet, sensing her unease. Though they could not understand it, she busied herself preparing food. Though her hands shook slightly as she worked, every sound outside, every footstep, every shout from the market made her tense. She felt as though the human's shadow still lingered near her home. The older boy finally asked, "Why are you afraid?" She froze, then forced a soft smile. "I am not afraid. I am careful." But her eyes betrayed her, full of worry and secrets. As the suns climbed higher, the streets grew noisy. The boys, restless, sat by the window, watching the city come alive. They spotted familiar faces, neighbors, merchants, children running freely. Life looked the same as always, yet they noticed how some people glanced toward their house and whispered quietly. It was as if the entire city had learned what had happened yesterday. By midday, the mother decided to go to the well for water. She told the boys to stay inside. The youngest begged to come, but she shook her head, her voice sharp again. "You must listen. Stay hidden." She left quickly, wrapping a long cloth around her face to conceal her features. At the well, she could feel eyes on her. Two women who often greeted her now looked away, avoiding her gaze. A man whispered something to his companion, and both stared at her with suspicion. She carried the heavy pot of water back to the house, her heart pounding harder with every step. She realized the story of the human and her sons had spread faster than she feared. Inside, the boys argued in hushed voices. The youngest insisted the human had looked at them strangely, almost as if he recognized them. The middle brother shook his head, saying it was only their imagination. The eldest, more serious, remained silent, but his eyes held a question he did not dare speak aloud. When their mother returned, she saw the tension on their faces. She set down the water pot and gathered them close. "You must listen to me," she said, her tone heavy. "If the human comes again, you must not speak to him. You must not follow him. Do you understand?" The boys nodded, though confusion filled their eyes. That night, when they lay down to sleep, she remained awake once more, staring at the stars. Her past pressed down on her chest like a weight she could no longer carry. Long ago, before her sons were born, she had lived among humans. She had trusted them. She had believed in their promises. And she had paid the price when betrayal destroyed everything she had known. Now, as the cool desert winds swept through the cracks of the house, she whispered a prayer into the night. She prayed that the human would leave, that her children would remain safe, that history would not repeat itself. But deep inside, she knew the truth. What had begun yesterday was only the first step. The human had not chosen her sons by chance. He had chosen them because of her dot, and soon, the past she had tried so hard to bury would come knocking at her door. The desert night was quiet, but inside the small house the mother could not rest. Her children slept close together on a thin mat, their breaths soft and steady. But her eyes stayed open. She sat by the small window, staring out at the stars. Each one seemed to whisper reminders of the past she had tried so hard to forget. She remembered another time, many years ago, when she had first met humans. Back then, she had been young, full of hope and curiosity. The humans spoke of peace, of friendship, of building a future together. They had smiled with warm faces and gentle words, and she had believed them. She had stood among them, trusting in their promises, dreaming of a better life. But promises had turned to chains, and friendship had turned to control. She still remembered the day it all ended. Fires in the streets, screams echoing through the night, the betrayal that cut deeper than any blade. She had escaped with nothing but her life, running into the deserts where no human would follow. Since then, she had hidden, building a new life, raising her sons far from the reach of human ambition. But humans never stayed away forever. A sound outside broke her thoughts, a faint crunch of footsteps on sand. She stiffened, her hand instinctively reaching for the old blade hidden beneath a cloth. Slowly, she moved to the door, her heart pounding. When she opened it, the street was empty, only shadows cast by the twin moons. But she knew what she had heard. Someone had been there, watching. The next morning, the market was restless. Word had spread quickly about the human asking for the boys. Whispers followed the family wherever they went. Some pitied them, others kept their distance, but all were curious. The human's presence was no longer just a rumor, it was a warning. The mother tried to keep her sons inside, but children were restless, and curiosity burned in their hearts. They asked again and again why the human had chosen them. She avoided the truth, telling them only that humans were dangerous and could not be trusted. But the eldest, wise beyond his years, pressed her with quiet questions. He had seen the fear in her eyes. He knew she was hiding something. That night, when the boys were asleep once more, she stood outside the house, staring at the horizon. She whispered to herself, "He has found me." The desert wind carried her words into the darkness. She felt it in her bones. The human was not here for chance, not for trade, not for pleasure. He was here for her. In the silence, her resolve hardened. She could not allow her children to be taken into the storm of her past. If the human came again, she would face him, no matter the cost. She had lived with fear for too long. The time for hiding was ending. The marketplace was louder than usual the next day. Yet beneath the noise there was a tension everyone could feel. Merchants shouted their prices, children darted between stalls, and the smell of roasted food filled the air. But conversations kept returning to one subject: the human who had appeared 2 days ago. His fine clothes, his calm face, and his strange choice of making 3 alien boys carry his bags had unsettled everyone. Some called it arrogance, others said it was a test, but none could explain it. The 3 brothers remained inside their home that morning, as their mother had commanded. They sat near the window, listening to the noise of the city while their mother moved about the small room, preparing food. Her every movement was sharp, her eyes constantly drawn to the doorway. as though she expected someone to appear at any moment. And then, in the late hours of the morning, the crowd outside shifted. People fell quiet. A ripple of silence spread across the market, and all eyes turned toward the wide street that led into the city. The human had returned. He walked slowly, his long robes brushing the ground, his boots tapping firmly on the stone. His face carried the same calm expression, but now his eyes were colder, sharper. He did not wander aimlessly. He moved with purpose. He went from stall to stall, speaking softly, his words carrying weight. "Where are the boys?" he asked a merchant who sold cloth. The man lowered his head quickly, pretending not to hear, but the human's gaze lingered until the merchant's hands trembled. At the fruit seller's stall, he asked again, "3 boys. Blue skin, you saw them." The woman muttered something under her breath and busied herself with her baskets, but her eyes darted nervously toward the edge of the city, the direction of the mother's home. Whispers followed the human as he walked. Fear spread like fire. Some people slipped away into side streets to avoid him. Others stood frozen, torn between curiosity and dread. From the window of their house, the boys saw him. The youngest gasped and ducked low. The middle one clenched his fists, while the eldest stared in silence, his face pale. Their mother rushed forward and pulled the curtain closed, her voice firm. "Do not look. Do not speak. He must not know you are here." But even as she spoke, her heart sank. She knew he already knew. The human's steps grew closer, echoing through the narrow street. Neighbors pretended to work, but their eyes kept drifting toward the family's door. The silence of their fear was as loud as any alarm. Finally, the human stopped in the center of the marketplace, his voice rising clearly for all to hear. "3 boys, he said slowly, his tone steady but commanding. "They carried my bags. Bring them to me." No one moved. The crowd stood still, eyes averted, but the weight of his words pressed on them all. Inside the house, the mother's breath shook. She gathered her son's clothes, whispering quickly, "Stay behind me. Whatever happens, you must not answer him." The boys clung to her. Sensing the storm that was coming, the human waited in silence, as though he could hear her words even through the walls. Then a thin smile touched his lips, a smile without warmth. He turned away, walking back down the street, but the unease he left behind was heavier than his presence. The crowd slowly returned to life, but everyone knew it was only the beginning. The human had not received what he wanted, and he would not leave without it. Inside the small house, the mother sat with her sons in the dim light, her heart pounding. She understood now that hiding would no longer be enough. The past she had tried to bury was standing outside her door, and soon she would be forced to face it. The sun was high the next day, burning across the desert sky, when the mother made her choice. She could no longer wait, no longer hide. The human had already marked them, and if she stayed silent, he would return again and again until the entire city turned against her family. Her sons watched her quietly as she tied her simple dress with a firm knot and wrapped a thin cloth across her shoulders. There was no fear in her eyes now, only a steady resolve that made her children feel both safe and uneasy. When she stepped into the market, the noise of the crowd softened. People turned to look at her. Some whispered, some lowered their eyes, but none ignored her. Her beauty had always set her apart, but today it was more than that. She walked with a strength that commanded attention, as though the desert itself parted for her. Her sons trailed behind, silent, their small faces filled with worry. The human was there, waiting. He stood near the center of the market, speaking casually with a merchant, but his eyes lifted the moment he saw her. A slow smile spread across his face, a smile that was sharp, almost mocking. He stepped forward, his fine robes brushing against the dust. "So," he said softly, loud enough for the crowd to hear, "the mother appears." His gaze shifted to the boys behind her, then back to her face. "Do you teach your children to serve strangers?" A hush fell over the market. Every ear leaned closer. She held her head high, her voice calm but strong. "My sons are not servants. They owe you nothing." The human's smile widened, but his eyes grew colder. "Then why did they carry my bags?" "They are children," she answered quickly. "They did not understand. And you, a man of wealth, should not burden them with your weight. The human chuckled, the sound low and unsettling. He took a step closer, closing the space between them. It was no burden, he said. It was a test, and they passed. His eyes narrowed slightly, his voice dropping. They are stronger than they appear. Just like their mother. A ripple moved through the crowd. The words carried something hidden, something only she seemed to understand. Her body stiffened, but she did not move back. My children will not be tested by you again, she said firmly. Her voice echoed across the silent market. Stay away from them. Stay away from me for a moment. The human said nothing. His eyes locked on hers, as if searching for something in her face. Then he leaned slightly closer and whispered, just enough for her to hear, I know who you are. Her breath caught. The blood in her veins turned cold. The human straightened, his smile returning, and without another word he turned and walked away, his robes trailing behind him. The crowd parted quickly to let him pass, their eyes darting between the woman and the departing figure. The mother stood frozen, her heart racing, her sons clutching her hands. The market slowly returned to its noise, but the air was heavy with unspoken fear. Everyone had heard the human's words. Everyone knew something deeper was unfolding, and in that moment, she realized the time for secrets was ending. The night after the confrontation in the market was heavy with silence. The desert winds howled across the rooftops, carrying sand through the narrow streets. But inside the small home of the 3 alien boys, the air was still. Their mother sat near the door, her eyes fixed on the shadows outside. She had not eaten, had not rested, and her children could sense the weight pressing down on her. They huddled together, whispering questions she could not answer. When the eldest finally asked, "Who is he?" her chest tightened. She had avoided the truth for too long. Now the human's words echoed in her ears, I know who you are. She could not run from it anymore. Slowly, she turned to her sons, her voice steady but filled with sorrow. You deserve to know what I never told you. The boys leaned closer, their glowing eyes wide. She began to speak of a time before they were born, when she had lived among humans. She told them how she had believed their promises of peace, how she had walked their cities and learned their ways. She had trusted them, even loved them. But betrayal had come like fire, burning away every hope. She had fled into the desert, carrying secrets no one else knew, secrets that had followed her ever since. Her sons sat in stunned silence. The youngest shook his head. But you are one of us. You are not like them. Tears filled her eyes as she touched his face. I am both. That is why he has come. Not for you. For me, outside. A sound broke the stillness, the unmistakable rhythm of boots on stone. The boys stiffened, fear rushing into their hearts. The mother rose quickly, her hand moving to the blade she kept hidden. She motioned for her children to stay back, her voice sharp but quiet. Do not move. Do not speak. The door shook under a sudden knock, hard and commanding. The human's voice came through, calm and steady. You cannot hide forever. Open the door. The boys clung to one another as their mother stepped forward. She pulled the door open just enough to stand in the frame, blocking the view of her children. The human stood there, tall and confident, his eyes gleaming under the moonlight. You have something that belongs to us, he said smoothly. You have knowledge. Knowledge we lost. It is time you returned. Her grip tightened on the blade, but she did not raise it. I owe you nothing. You took everything from me once. You will not take my sons. The human's smile faded, his expression turning hard. Do not mistake kindness for weakness. I spared your life years ago. Do not make me regret it. The words cut through her like a blade. The boys behind her gasped softly. They had never heard anyone speak to their mother this way. Never imagined she had been spared by the very man now standing before them. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, the desert winds moaning in the distance. Then, with a voice that shook but carried the weight of truth, she answered, If you want me, you must face all of us. I will not run again. The human's eyes flickered with something unreadable, anger, perhaps surprise, or even respect. He studied her for a moment longer, then stepped back into the street. Very well, he said softly, but this is only the beginning. He turned and walked into the shadows, his figure swallowed by the night. Inside the house, the boys rushed to their mother's side. She pulled them close, her heart torn between fear and pride. She knew the danger was not over. The human would return, and when he did, the truth of her past and the fate of her family would shake not only the market, not only the city, but perhaps the entire desert world. And as the stars burned brightly above, the mother whispered to herself the words she had feared to speak for so long: "War is coming.